All right, y'all. Well, let's make sure I'm right. We're going to be in chapter 10 today, right? Is that correct? Okay. All right, chapter 10 of our Sunday school book, which is on Psalm 128. And what is if you had to summarize the subject matter there in one word, what is the subject of Psalm 128? Blessing. Now, Ron, tell us a little bit about that word. I mean, what is blessedness? What is blessing? We bless your heart. You know, we throw this around a lot. What does the word mean?
Yeah, I think in this context, it's he who's blessed who walks in the path of God. So it's God who's going to bestow His goodness on you.
That's a great summary.
That means you're not going to have trouble, but there's a calmness and a contentment, even though you may be going through something, you know that God's got it.
That's so two things that Ron said there that are really good. One is that God is the one who's going to bestow this blessing, or He's going to bestow His goodness on you. And then, so that's the positive side. And then the other side of this is that even when difficult things in life happen, Ron said there's that peace, contentment of knowing that God's got it, right? That's what it means to be blessed. So let's read this psalm. Will someone read Psalm 128 for us in the Message?
All you who fear God, how blessed you are. How happily you walk on His smooth, straight road. You worked hard and deserve all you've got coming. Enjoy the blessing. Revel in the goodness. Your wife will bear children as a vine bears grapes. Your household lush as a vineyard. The children around your table as fresh and promising as young olive shoots. Stand in awe of God's yes. Oh, how He blesses the one who fears God. Enjoy the good life in Jerusalem every day of your life, and enjoy your grandchildren. Peace to Israel.
Thank you, Jackie. What did y'all think of Peterson's translation? We'll do the good, the bad, and the ugly today. What did y'all like? What didn't you like?
A little bit too much of the prosperity gospel-ish kind of stuff.
Okay, now this is interesting. Does it strike anyone else that way? Let me read real quick. No, I'm not disagreeing with you, actually. Let me read the ESV, and I want you to ask the same question. Does this strike you as prosperity gospel-ish? Here's the ESV. Blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in His ways. You shall eat the fruit of the labor of your hands. You shall be blessed, and it shall be well with you. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine within your house. Your children will be like olive shoots around your table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. The Lord bless you from Zion. May you see the prosperity of Jerusalem all the days of your life. May you see your children's children. Peace be upon Israel. That sound prosperity gospel-ish?
I don't think so, because it says you will see the fruit of your hands.
Yes.
You just have to work.
Sure.
Not just that, I believe I get rich.
Yeah, okay, good. I agree with that.
I think for those who fear the God and walk in His ways
Yes.
is first.
Yes. That's before anything else we get that, right? So there's some context. My point here simply, Ron, is that it struck me that way as well, but even as I read the ESV, it bothers me a little bit, and I think maybe it's supposed to. Sometimes we look at the Christian faith and we look at the Lord as restrictive, right? And sometimes we get a little carried away with that, right? We do serve a God who longs to bless us and who does. And but that being said, I am sympathetic with that statement for sure.
But I also think there's a difference between, to me, and maybe just the way it sounds in my ears, but you shall eat the fruit of the labor of your hands sounds to me different than you worked hard and deserve all you got coming.
Sure. Yeah. There's a difference there.
We don't really deserve a thing.
Yes.
except death and hell, but I mean,
Is that kind of what you're hearing, Ron, there? That's the difference? Yeah, the deserving piece is interesting, right?
Well, in verse 4, though, all of the verse 1, 2, and 3 will only take place if you do fear the Lord.
Mm,
So you have to
yes.
do that first.
yes, and I think, Wes, that's kind of what you're getting at too, right? This provides context. Good. So let's see how this psalm can help us on our journey to heaven. The way he opens this chapter is fascinating to me. He asks this question: is it hard or easy to be a Christian? All right, so I thought we were going to have some good discussion about this. This is good. So he says it's easy, and Kathy says, I don't agree. Okay, good. Now, Kathy, tell us what you mean. Why don't you agree?
I know what he's saying.
Yeah.
I know what he's getting at.
Yes.
And the first thing I thought about is it begins to make me doubt because it's not easy for me.
Right.
And so therefore do I not, quote, have the
Ah.
things I need
Yes.
to make it easy.
Right. Is in other words, we have this other Christian saying, it's easy for me, and then that makes you wonder, why not for me? Is there something wrong with me,
Well,
right?
here's what made my brain go blip. The easiest thing in the world is to be a Christian. What is hard is to be a sinner. They are not mutually exclusive.
Good. Let me talk us through this, because I read some of these things that y'all are talking about, and the same thoughts occurred to me. So here's how I see it. Maybe this will help. In absolute terms, we might say it's hard to be a Christian, right? It is. Why is it hard to be a Christian? Y'all talk to me about that a little bit. What's hard about it?
You're constantly being tempted to do things that aren't Christian things.
Okay, good. So Jackie said you're constantly being tempted to do things that aren't Christian things to do. But if you're not a Christian, you don't have to deal with that, at least not in the same way, right? There's nothing telling you don't do these things. Good. Why else is it hard to be a Christian? Todd?
A lot of society or non-Christians that are just waiting for you to fall.
Okay, good. So this is a similar line of thought, but now you're in the place of, I don't necessarily want to say being on a pedestal, but you're aware that people are watching.
People are looking at you.
You're carrying this title, right? And that added pressure is there. Good. What else?
Well, we don't live in a country. I mean, we would like to come here, and we would like to go home and be in our little Christian bubble.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not reality.
No.
And that is the reason that, I have it on the line, we discussed it a long time last night. It is not easy, because there is a world, and you interact with that world,
Mhm.
and you interact with a lot of things that you see that, based on Christian foundations, are wrong,
Yes.
but you, to some degree, have to coexist with that,
Yes.
and that's not easy.
No, it's not.
And so, regardless of what he says, he's wrong.
All right, so here's the deal. I agree with everything y'all just said. There's a lot of trials and tribulations along the road of faith, right? And I think if we're thinking about the Psalms of Ascent, that's where we are, right? So these are songs that people sang as they journeyed from their home up to Jerusalem. And they're filled with difficulties because these are difficulties they would not face if they weren't on the journey, right? If they had just stayed home, they wouldn't have had to deal with a lot of this stuff. And the same thing is true in the Christian life. But here's the deal. As I understand him, Peterson is not speaking in absolute terms. He's speaking in relative terms. So the question is not, is it hard to be a Christian? The answer to that is obviously yes. What he's asking is this. He's saying, in other words, life is hard, whether you're a Christian or not. So comparatively, who has it worse, Christians or non-Christians? What do y'all think about that? Non-Christians, right? Y'all were in Sunday school, many of you, a few weeks ago when Gail was sitting, I still remember where she was sitting, and she was literally brought to tears as she thought about the people she knows going through this life without the comfort and blessedness of the Lord. Those people have it worse. It's harder for them, right? And that's what Peterson's saying. And now I want to get to Jackie's comment. Can you read that quote again? I think it's on the first
The
page.
easiest thing in the world is to be a Christian. What is hard is to be a sinner.
Okay, so are Christians sinners? Yes, right? That's not what well, I don't know what he's saying. I don't know what he's saying here. I will say what he should be saying is that the hardest thing in the world is to be a lost sinner, right? To be a sinner apart from Christ. Much easier to travel this road with the Lord. Let me read a couple other things from page 109. The structure of this world, this is what he means, was created by God so that we can live in it easily and happily as His children. In the course of Christian discipleship, we discover that without Christ, we are doing it the hard way, and that with Christ, we are doing it the easy way. It is not Christians who have it hard, but non-Christians. Now, I think it's super important that we grasp this central idea. I think it matters for the way we share the gospel, for the way we live. Sometimes we are guilty of portraying the Christian life unjustly as this super hard, burdensome, mopey sort of a thing, right? We talk about it sort of the way that, have you ever known or been someone who's on a diet and you're just really having a hard time with it? And you got to tell everybody about it, right? It's like, well, I can't have that cake, I'm on a diet. I can't have that Coke, I'm on a diet. And this is sometimes how we talk about the Christian life. And the conclusion that people draw is, well, I don't want to go on that diet, and I don't want to be a Christian. That sounds awful, right? What Peterson is trying to get us to understand is that is not true. It is so much better to be a Christian than not to be, and we ought to portray it that way. We could list countless examples of people we know who are living in any number of ways that are outside the law of God. And it's not just that it's wrong, it's that it's hard, right? When you do things outside of the way that God has commanded, it's just harder for you. It's harder to live. You have a harder time in this world. This is the point he's making. Okay, so let's get into this psalm. Walking in God's way, Ron pointed this out to us, is commonly called blessing. And this psalm is all about blessing. It begins with these three promises and pronouncements of blessing. Here's what it says. All you who fear God, how blessed you are, how happily you walk on His smooth, straight road. You worked hard and deserve all that you've got coming. Enjoy the blessing, revel in the goodness. And then in verse 3, we get this illustration of blessing. Your wife will bear children as a vine bears grapes, your household lush as a vineyard, the children around your table as fresh as promising young olive shoots. And then we close with two more promises and pronouncements of blessing. Oh, how He blesses the one who fears God. Enjoy the good life in Jerusalem every day of your life, and enjoy your grandchildren. The whole psalm is just this joyous proclamation of the blessing of God, right? What it's like to live under God's rule. And then Peterson does something here that I love. He says that the Bible, so it's not just the psalm that's this way. The Bible, from the very beginning to the very end, is one long proclamation of blessing. So he highlights some important characters, and he highlights what God says to them. So check this out. God says to Adam, this is Genesis 1:28, God says to Adam and Eve, God blessed them, okay? To Abraham, I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. Genesis 12:2. He blesses all 12 of the tribes of Israel individually. David says in 2 Samuel 7:29, with your blessing shall the house of your servant be blessed forever. And then Jesus famously in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, what are the Beatitudes? How do they start? Blessed are, right? So, and he points out as well that Revelation ends this way. And so the whole Bible is not, like we sometimes make it out to be, this list of do's and don'ts, burdens we have to carry, things we need to mope about. It's a story of blessing. That's what the whole book is. So here's my question. I want us to discuss this for a few minutes. Do we proclaim the Christian life to be a life of blessing? Or are we guilty, like I've suggested, of being kind of mopey, I'm on a diet sort of Christians? And how can we do better about proclaiming it as a life of blessing? What do y'all think?
I think it's bifurcated. I think a lot of times on the surface, we moan and groan
Mm.
and we act like fools.
Mm.
At the end of the day, when it really gets going
Mm.
wrong, we go to our knees and we know we're blessed.
Mm.
And so I think that to some degree we look spoiled. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, we belong to God. So, you know, it's one of those things that on the surface sometimes we take for granted, but
Mm.
underneath it all, we know.
Spoiled is a great word, that sometimes we look and act spoiled, right? And spoiled kids, I know because I was one, forget how good we have it, right? That's baseline for us, and we forget how blessed we really are. And sometimes, like Oliver put so well, it's not till the going really gets tough that we kind of remember that and acknowledge that. So maybe one thing that we can do is more consciously remind ourselves, right, of how good we have it, and do it out loud, right, so that the people around us hear this as well. I saw another hand. Beverly.
It's kind of interesting, this was my daughter's call, and said, Mom, do you know how blessed we are?
Mm,
And of course, my first response was yes,
mm,
because we're close, we talk all day
mm,
long, we spend time together, and we have Christian homes.
mm.
So just reminding somebody.
Yes.
how blessed we are.
Yes, good. So not just reminding ourselves, right, but man, calling up our family members or whoever, friends, whoever, and say, man, I've been thinking today about how blessed we are. And then you can talk through those things together. And obviously that had an impact on Beverly, right? That's, I don't know how many days ago, but earlier this week, and it's still on Beverly's mind. Linda.
Sometimes when bad things happen, they end up being a blessing,
Mm,
like Jackie's house.
mm,
But what a blessing
Mm.
is the church came together
yes,
and
yes,
and the girl who was bit by the shark and lost her hand and her leg, I'm following on Facebook, they're giving updates of it.
mm,
It is such good testimony as they talk about praying through it and what God is
mm,
everybody who sees
yes,
being blessed with that.
yes. And so the Lord has this amazing way, right, of bringing good out of great evil. And so, Job famously says, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. What's the next word? Blessed be the name of the Lord. It doesn't mean what happened to him was good. It just means the Lord brought good out of it.
I think too, what people are saying right now is kind of the heart and soul of why this isn't the prosperity gospel.
Yeah,
because
right.
Because talking about their money blessings.
Yes.
And I think how we define blessing is the key, because we define it differently than the world does.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that sharing of the faith and not looking like we're whining or that we're on a diet is to remind ourselves and other people, you're talking about a whole different thing than what an actual blessing is. Because your money could be here today and gone tomorrow.
And it can your money can be a curse,
And it
right?
can be a curse.
Yes.
Because it becomes more important to you than your actual blessing.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think it's the core of sharing that joy, that happiness that we have, is to remember what it is that really makes us
Yes.
joyful.
For sure. Absolutely.
I think too, John, that, to help keep us on track
Mm.
in our personal prayer life, I know for me, I start out with thanking God
Mhm.
for specific blessings.
Yes.
And that for me, keeps the focus where it ought to be, and that's on God.
Yes. And we
It
really,
reminds me how blessed I am.
right. And the specific is what's important, right? because you begin to realize how blessed you really are when you begin to go through that list of things the Lord's blessed you with.
And
Yes?
it's in little things too. Like
Oh, yes.
we went out one day, it's been several months back, and the tractor wouldn't crank. And, I said, okay, I checked the oil, I checked the battery. I said, well, battery was hot, I put my tester on. So I said, the only thing I know to do is clean cables.
Sure.
So Melissa was standing there, and I would raise the hood, and I'd take it all apart, clean the cables, and put it all back together again, and jump over the tractor right there. Melissa said, boy, you did good. I said, no.
Thank you, Lord, right? Little things too,
Little.
yes.
We have, at school, we have a maintenance man who's just famous because, like, he can fix absolutely anything, or do absolutely anything. Like, I don't know of a time when we said, hey, Mr. Sack, can you do so? And it's wound up not getting
Right,
done.
right.
And I've been there 17 years. And sometimes he'll be fooling with something, and, then the next thing you know, it's working again. And it's like, what did you do? And he'll go, I prayed.
I pray.
There you go.
Love it. All right, I want to move to this next section, verse 3, I believe it is. So the psalmist gives us this illustration of a fruitful wife and many children. I think it has something to teach us, and I want to bicker with parentheses here as well. So page 112, Peterson says, the standard signs of happiness, parentheses, in Hebrew culture were a wife who had many children and children who gathered and grew around the table. All I want to say about this is still a very good indicator of happiness, right? It is still a wonderful and blessed thing to have a fruitful wife and a lot of kids gathered around your table. We should not relegate that to the Hebrew culture of the past. We're trying to in our culture today, but we should not. So what's the point of this? I want to ask you all this question. Why, of all the things that the psalmist could have chosen, did he choose a full family dinner table as an indication of a blessed life?
If you got a family and you got food.
Okay, so two blessings right there. You got family, you got food.
Got a
Good.
table.
And you got a table, yes.
Presumably a roof to put it under.
That's right. John.
Having children is an act of faith.
Okay, why?
It is a response to God of His blessings. It is an expectation of blessings to come, and an expectation that God will be in charge now and in the future.
Yes.
Because, you hear so many nowadays saying, "Why would I want to bring a child into this world?"
Yes.
That's just completely unrelated from how we as Christians
Yes. Now, there's something really powerful here for us, I think. And I'm talking to myself as a member of this generation that John's talking about. There's a lot of people my age asking that question. Why would I want to bring kids into this world? And John's correct that that's a very unchristian view of the world, but I think as people who care about others, one thing that we should hear in that is a very real fear and despair about the state of the world today. And we should affirm that because things are not good in the world today, right? But what we should also hear in that is an invitation to give some hope, right? Because they're seeing the world a certain way and we see some of the same stuff, but we know something they don't, right? And so this is an invitation to say, first of all, I hear you. Things are rough, but can I share something with you? John.
And I mean, ultimately, when couples decide not to have children, they are taken away from what God can do.
Right, yes.
It's an act of, no, we're going to be the God, we're not going to have children. And it's just a way of saying that we don't, basically, we don't believe that God can change this world.
Right, that things will progressively get worse. Or even outside, because, well, look, they might. I don't know. But whether they do or not, God's on the throne, right? Kathy?
Because
Sure.
there are people out there that would love to have children that can't have them.
My brother and his wife being two of
And when
them,
we
yes.
say that, I'm not sure what they're always thinking.
Yeah, sure. And I think that caveat is needed and important, absolutely. I think and we got to realize this when we look at wisdom literature like the Psalms, the Bible speaks in this is what's normal, right? Historically, most people are able to have children, and when they can, this is an indication of the Lord's blessing. And although to your point, Kathy, one of the repeated sorrows in the Bible is the barren woman, right? We have a handful at least of examples of this, but what's beautiful, right, is I can't think of an example. I think all the barren woman stories we have end up how? In the great blessing of the Lord and children. And so we should have compassion for people who find themselves outside the norm. And yet, we still get to hold up a beautiful biblical hope to them, right? And we live in an age now, this has been a blessing for my brother and his wife, where might not be able to go about it the normal way, but there are a lot of options to end up with a table full of children, right? It's amazing. So here's the point, according to Peterson, I love this. Blessing has inherent in it the power to increase. It functions by sharing and delight in life. The characteristic of blessing is to multiply. So the point of the full table is that you've got two parents who know the Lord, and around the table they get to share the blessing of knowing the Lord with who? With their kids, right? This is the reason that it's the picture of blessing. So the biblical paradigm here is really simple. God shared with us. He shared His world with us. He shared His Son with us. And so we're to turn around and do what? Share. That's it, right? Share the blessing He's given us with others. And so this is, I want to spend probably most of the rest of our time on this. I want us to discuss if this is the biblical paradigm, sharing the blessing of God around the table. It is, by the way. How can we get better at that? And for some of you who are doing this already, sharing around the table with people who don't know Jesus, can y'all help us? Tell us how we can get better at this? I'll lead into the discussion with this piece of information. I'm reading a book right now about people who have left the church. And the author is very hopeful about getting them back to church, and he gives kind of 3 categories that these people fall in. I told y'all one last week, and that is 80% of people who have left the church, all they need to come back is a nudge. If you invite them, they'll say yes, they'll come. It's that simple. But there's another category of people who the author says, if they're going to come back, they need your dinner table. They need your dinner table. So let's talk through that. What do you think he means that people need your dinner table? And how can we do this better than we are right now?
Well, they need to do love.
Mm.
They need to see Christian hospitality. This is, to be going, okay, I strayed away from the church for whatever reason. I got disenchanted. I felt disenfranchised, whatever. This is what the church can be like. They need that picture of the kingdom.
They need to share in that blessing, right? Because you pointed out so well, a lot of these people have had an experience with church that is not like what the psalmist is laying out, right? They didn't have the experience of sitting around the table and being blessed. For them, church was something much worse. Mary Evelyn?
They need some support, like come along next to them, like maybe even like drive them to church, or like, we can meet somewhere and you can walk in church together. They need you to introduce some people. They don't just want to walk
Yeah.
in and feel like by themselves.
Yes, right. So I love this. Mary Evelyn said they need your support. If you can, in your mind, picture a family sitting down at dinner. Okay, maybe you know them, maybe you don't. But to just walk into their house and pull up a chair and sit down at the table is uncomfortable, to say the least, right? I have one friend, well, maybe, I think I have a few more now, but when I was growing up, I had one friend whose house I could do this at. Just pull up unannounced, didn't have to knock, just sit down at his table, right? That's still is my best friend today. But generally speaking, Mary Evelyn's right. We need people to bring us in, right? We need that community, people to introduce us. Yes, ma'am. Mm. Mm. Montana. And yes. And this creeps into our own lives. And let me just confess to you a way it creeps into mine. Doing this kind of ministry, dinner table ministry, it's not a huge financial commitment. That's not where the greed comes in, I don't think. I think it comes in when we consider our time, okay? I want my time for me and for my family, right? But more for me, right? Because I have to share it with my family as well. And so I think the main thing that stops us from doing this is a willingness to share our time with other people, right? Now, let me tell you what's also true, and this fits with the theme of this chapter. When I do share my time, am I more or less blessed than if I don't? Every time, right? There's something, and I can say this after I told Todd Brown this morning, I think I've got a VBS hangover. I'm exhausted from this week, but there is something that is so wonderful about expending yourself on a worthy cause, right? About being tired because you served and it was in a good cause. And so I think, look, might you be more tired if you really take this seriously and begin to have your neighbors around your dinner table? Yeah, right? But it's going to be good for you as well. It's going to be a blessing. Susan? Mm. Mm. Yes. Yeah, right. Get off yourself.
Because people, once you start to do that and you start to actually be investing in other people, the enemy has less and less hold and less play in your mind.
Yes.
You realize this was never about me.
Mm-mm.
And it makes it so much easier because you don't have to feel the weight of, you don't have to prepare a topic. You don't have to think of prepare Bible verses or
Nope.
think of what you're going to say. You can just sit there and listen and just ask the person questions about themselves and get to know them.
Yes. And that in and of itself, y'all, the culture doesn't listen, and we're pretty bad at it too. So just the act of loving someone through listening is something that people really don't find anywhere else, right? So that in and of itself is much more powerful maybe than many of the things you could say. John?
So are we saying that extroverts are blessed and introverts are
Good. No. And maybe...
That's the introverts, we're the listeners because we don't have
Yeah.
all the time.
But also, I think it's the introverts who, this is kind of what I was getting at when I said I'm selfish about my time. It's the introverts who really need to realize and are going to have to make that sacrifice to have someone into their space. But you're right, going with what Susan's saying, it's the introverts who have something to offer that a lot of times people like me struggle to do, right? Because I want to run my mouth. But it's people like Jackie who can, and just listen, right? So I think the Lord, or what the psalm is telling us, is that this cuts both ways. All right, y'all, let me wrap up with this thought. This is what he's saying, this section about the smooth road is the way of blessing. God has built the world in a certain way, okay? We could point to any number of things, but he set it up in such a way that if you listen to him, you will be blessed. And if you don't, you won't be. So I love these couple quotes. Peterson gives this illustration of somebody who wants to travel north, right? But all the roads cut east and west. And he says, okay, so if you want to get north, what are you going to have to do? You got to get off the road, and when you do, you got to go through rivers, you got to jump over walls, you got to cut your way through the brush. It's not going to be a nice journey. And here's his comment on this. Such is the conduct of those who are trying to achieve some meaning in their lives, pursuing their right to happiness, but refusing to take the well-traveled roads that lead there. Keeping the rules and obeying the commands is only common sense. Here's my favorite line from this chapter. If you go against the grain of the universe, you get splinters. Yes, this is what the message that I want us increasingly to take to our community, is that are there rules and regulations that the Bible gives us? Of course, but they're for our good, and we disobey them to our peril, right? It's better for us, we don't get the splinters, when we obey the rules. And so here's the deal, y'all. This is what I want you to walk away with. Everybody you know, I can confidently say this, every person you know wants to be happy. They want to be blessed. And you know how they can get that, right? The gospel is good news unless we turn it into something else, unless we turn it into a burden, unless we turn it into a list of rules and regulations. The gospel is good news. So here's the thing. The Christian life is the blessed life unless we turn it into something else. Let's be winsome in our sharing of the gospel. Let's not act like the people on a diet. I'm not asking you to change anything. All I'm asking you to do is be honest. Get some perspective and let the people in your life know, I've got it good. It's what Oliver said. We get there at the end of the day usually. Let's get there at the beginning of the day. Let's start there and realize how blessed we are. Susan, we'll end with you.
Well, this would be something I think I shared with you before, and I can't remember who first said it, but if it gets hard to share the gospel, people are looking at you like you have it all together, and let your mess be your mess.
Yeah.
Like, share the ugly, because when you share your ugly, then they realize, oh, there really is nothing to that person. It is Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
and you're not like hiding the ugly, but just share your mess, because that's what people relate to. And then when they see you're joyful despite the hardship,
Yeah.
and that you have hope despite the loss, and that you have focus despite everything falling down around you, that's what they're attracted to.
Yes.
That's what is relatable.
Just be honest, right? That's all it takes. And the Lord takes that and does amazing things. All right, y'all, let me pray for us, and we're going to head to worship. Lord, would you